First things first, I have a stick of frozen butter that I've crushed using my pastry mixer. Now I'm adding 3 cups of self-rising flour. No need to use all-purpose and add baking soda and baking powder and salt. Just go ahead and use the self-rising. That's what my grandmother taught me. So here I am just finishing adding the last cup of self-rising flour, and then I'm going to take my pastry blender and I'm going to cut the butter in until the texture is kind of gravelly. It won't be gravelly all over. Don't worry if it's not. This isn't a pie crust. This is biscuits. But I'm trying to break that butter up so that the clumps of butter are not quite so large as they were before. When it looks like most of the butter is cut into it into smaller than a pea size even lumps, I go ahead and check it on my pastry blender to see. You can see I'm doing that now. Next, I'm just going to grab a fork and I'm going to stir it around a bit and check for any large clumps of butter. This isn't rocket surgery, I promise. Making biscuits is as easy as anything you'll ever do. If you can turn the oven on, you can bake the best biscuit you've ever put in your mouth. Just stir it around real good. Check it. Make sure there's no large clumps of butter. Use your fork and shake some off occasionally. You can see I'm showing you the texture of it here. There's little small chunks of butter in there, and that's okay. That's what I'm looking for. That's what's going to make this biscuit worth eating. Trust me. After you're satisfied that the texture of your dough looks kind of like what's going on with mine, go ahead and grab your buttermilk. I use Goshen Homestead Creamery's Creamline buttermilk. It's made over in Lebanon, Virginia with their dairy cows that are pastured on grass 100%. Here I am just showing you the buttermilk. Now it's time to pour some in, and I'm just going to pour a little bit in, not a great big bunch. And I'm going to take that fork and start stirring around. As I see I need it, I'm going to add more until the consistency of this dough gets to what I think it should look like. Don't be shy. Add a little bit, stir it, add a little more, and keep going until the dough looks just right. If you keep watching this video, in just a minute I'll show you what a biscuit dough should look like. As you can see, I'm not shy at all to add a little more buttermilk as I think I need it. There's still a little bit of dry flour in there, and I want to get all of that picked up to make a nice sticky dough before I turn it out on my dough board. I do this just the way my grandmother taught me. She always said, you can't take it out once it's in, but you can add a little more as you need it. So that's what I practice anytime that I'm making my biscuits. I'm still seeing some patches of dry flour in the bottom of the bowl, and when I turn the dough over, it still has a little bit of dry, so I'm just adding a little more buttermilk. Like I said, I just add it as I need it. Pretty soon, I'll have a dough that I'm satisfied with, and all of that wet mixture will pick up the powder that's in the bottom, and it'll end up as a sticky dough. Now, there we go. It looks just about right. I'm going to pick it up and show you the texture of this dough. It's quite sticky. It's not like making sandwich bread. You want it to have plenty of moisture inside so that when you put it in to bake up, it makes a nice fluffy biscuit. Now, you could do this on your countertop, but I don't like all the mess that it makes, so I always do it on a board. Here I am just sprinkling out some flour, and I'm going to rub it around on there so I get a nice even coat. You want the flour to be all over the surface, otherwise your dough is going to stick to it. Next up, I'll just turn the dough right out onto this floured board, and then I'll sprinkle a little bit of flour on top of it and pat it down. Turn your dough right out on your floured board and go ahead and scrape that bowl real good. Waste not, want not. That's what my granny always said. Not a bit of this dough ever goes to waste. Be sure you clean your fork off too. Next up, I'll grab some flour and sprinkle it over the top, and then I'm just gonna press it down. And I measure it using my first knuckle on my finger. I press it down till I think it looks like it's about as thick as from the tip of my finger to that first knuckle. I sprinkle it just so the top of it is just barely covered with flour. Don't overdo it. You don't want powdery biscuits when they're finished. Then you just pat it out with your hands. No need to use a rolling pin. It's not that fancy. Here you see I'm just measuring it all the way around to make sure it's an even thickness. Just to that first knuckle on my finger. It's not hard, y'all. Next up, I'm going to grab a knife and cut it. I don't use a biscuit cutter because then you end up with wasted parts of the dough, and this is way too good to let any go to waste. So here you see me, I've just grabbed a knife, and I'm just going to cut it right down the middle and then across to make my biscuits. I promise you, square biscuits eat just as good as the round kind. Next up, I just slide my board right over. See, my countertop's still clean. And then I have a cast iron skillet that I've just put melted butter in. This skillet is not hot. This ain't cornbread, this is biscuits. Now I'm just gonna place my biscuits down in there. See how I'm making them touch? That's important to get a good rise on it. You want it to touch the edge of your skillet, and you want it to touch each other. My granny always said that helped them climb. Next up, I preheat my oven to 450 degrees, and I brush the tops of the biscuits with buttermilk and melted butter. Then I slide them in and let them bake up like you see right here. Now we don't time them. We use our nose and our eyes to know when it's time to take these biscuits out. They should look like this right here and smell like heaven. We take them straight out of the oven and put them straight on a plate and pop some soft butter on top of it and enjoy them.